It's May 3rd, 2020, 5:03 p.m. EST, and counting. It all started with this, and whatever the story behind it doesn't really fit into this video. But what does fit into this video is the result this virus had on aviation, and specifically the Boeing 747. Turns out that majority of airlines prefer newer and more fuel-efficient two-engine aircraft, leaving the legendary 747 in the dust. Lockdown was a perfect opportunity for airlines to retire their 747s. So, the first airline to take this horrifying step was KLM. KLM had been among the 747's largest operators. It all began in 1967 when Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport opened.
You didn't pronounce that right.
What?
Schiphol.
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 Well, I'm not Dutch and I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyways, KLM had decided that they, as a flag carrier of the Netherlands, needed to match the size of the aircraft they operated with the size of the airport they used. So they went ahead and purchased the largest aircraft available at the time, the 747-200. This was in 1971. The 747 towered over any other airplane in the airport, and ever since then, KLM has always operated the 747. KLM began reducing their routes with the 747 over the past few years, until now, where they had the perfect opportunity to retire their entire fleet of 747-400s. KLM was planning to have retired these 747s by next year, i.e. mid-2021, but since a pandemic was at its peak, it was a perfect opportunity to flush out the older planes and bring in the newer kids such as the A330, 777, and the Dreamliner. The 10 747s that KLM had been operating included 3 cargo-based aircraft. It seems now that the other 7 will join in and also become cargo aircraft post-COVID-19. While there's still hope for these aircraft, it's still sad that we won't see any more pretty blue KLM liveries on the Boeing 747. Before any aviator could take in the tragic yet practical decision of KLM, Qantas, the Australian carrier, with the kangaroo, decided that it was time for them to be copycats. Kangaroo cats, whatever. Qantas had first ordered the 747 in 1967 to replace their 707s. The 747 helped Qantas get to and from the faraway continent of Australia. Qantas operated a total of 65 747s, including 57 that they had purchased directly from Boeing. As of 2019, Qantas operated 6 Boeing 747-400s. The airline relied more on the A380 and the A330 than the 747, and now they don't rely on the 747 at all. Well, that's because they entirely retired their fleet of 747s last month.
Not funny. No. Not at all funny.
Whatever. Anyways, they will be flying the 747s once more over to the US for scrapping in the Californian desert.
Shush everyone.
And it's confirmed that you won't see any more Qantas livery 747s again. Qantas was planning on retiring these 6 747s by next year, but unlike KLM, they decided it was time now. The carrier is turning to the newer and more fuel-efficient 787 Dreamliner to carry forward for the long-term future. The British, famous for their...
I don't know who hired you.
You really need to polish up that accent of yours. It's the British, famous for their Concorde.
You hear him?
I'm sorry, I'm not British. I'm Canadian. Anyways, British Airways operates a total of 36 Boeing 747-400s. In 1986, BA purchased their first 19 Boeing 747s. In late March and early April of this year, British Airways sent 10 of their 747s over to Kemble Coswell Airport in the UK for temporary storage and then
scrapping.
BA's fleet is old, and it sort of makes sense for them to be retiring a few of their older aircraft. Some of their 747's due date has already been reached, while others were due by next year. BA has not yet turned to an alternative, but it seems now that they're just trying to downsize. It's April now, and Lufthansa decides that they would also like to downsize their fleets by retiring some of their 747s A380s, A320s, and A330s.
Their A330s are just fine. It's the A340s that they are retiring.
Oh, my mistake. Lufthansa first flew the 747 in 1970 and was the first airline in Europe to use it for long-haul service. Lufthansa had purchased the 747-100 in 1970, the 747-200 in 1971, following with the well-known 400 in 1989, and then the 747-8i in 2006. These aircraft totaled up to be 80. Of these, Lufthansa operated 32 just 2 months ago, and since they retired 5, they're left with...
Hey, let me do the math. 32 minus 5. 32, 31, 30, 29, 28, 27. 27.
Okay, 27 it is.
Fun fact. Boeing only made the new 747-8 because Lufthansa urged them to. Lufthansa also has the most 747-8s of any other airline.
Thanks for the information, but the problem doesn't come in with the newer 747-8s. Rather with the 747-400 from way, way, way back in 1989, basically 1990, which is still 30 years ago. Lufthansa was planning to have retired these by 2025, but as this guy came along, they retired early. Well, this isn't such bad news for aviators since Lufthansa has only retired 15% of their 747 so far. Lufthansa also carries the new 747-8, which will carry forward for at least a decade and a half. Then suddenly, the question arises, what's next for these 747s? Well, it's not confirmed yet, but it's quite likely that they'll be scrapped up in aircraft graveyard. Corsair, the airline that's operated almost every queen of the sky, has finally turned into an all-Airbus airline. Corsair was France's only airline left to be operating 747s, and now France doesn't operate any. Corsair first flew the 747-100 in 1991, then began operating the 747-200 and 300 in 1992, and finally turned to the famous 747-400 in 1999. Corsair even operated the 747 SP from 1994 to 1996. As of last year, Corsair operated only 3 747-400s, in which they planned on retiring in late 2020 and early 2021. Since the pandemic was at its peak, and their fleets were already grounded, they made a decision to fully retire their fleet of 747s a bit early. It isn't confirmed what Corsair will be doing with these 747s yet, but it's likely they'll make them cargo freighters since they owned all 3. Corsair says that they are going to take on the new A330neo to replace these 747s and to keep their airline in shape. In the past 2 months, 34 Boeing 747-400s have been retired by 5 airlines. The truth is now undeniable that the 747 will soon face full extinction, and the only place you might see one is in a museum. The good news is that many cargo freighters are planning to keep their 747s for quite a while. Cargo airlines such as Cathay Pacific Cargo, UPS, Cargolux, Eva Air, Atlas Air, and Asiana Cargo operate even the oldest versions of the 747. This is because the 747 was first intended to be a military cargo aircraft. That's the reason it has a hump. The 747 has surely proved to be reliable and useful to every airline that has operated it. To see the slow death of the Queen of the Skies is upsetting, but reality is reality.
Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch part 2 of this series, click here. Also remember to subscribe and watch other videos by Airbo Pro.